This is the CineTreak Cinelive C1 video switcher and mixer. It's yet another entrant to the compact 4-input HDMI switcher market, dominated, at least in mindset I think, by Blackmagic's ATEM mini devices. This is what you get in the box: the switcher, a power supply and a basic instruction manual. The switcher is nicely compact, just about the size of a paperback book and the same thickness too, which makes it very easy to carry around. On the left-hand side you have buttons for changing settings on the fly, as well as starting and stopping recording and live streaming. Below that is a 4-way joystick which you can push in to select things in the menus. The traditional 2 rows of camera select buttons run along the bottom, the top set for live output, the bottom row for preview selection. And on the right a dial that turns and clicks in, again to make menu choices, along with buttons for cutting between shots and entering the menus. There's an old-school T-bar for transitions too. One starring aspect to the device is this large screen, which shows you all your camera inputs, your output and your menu settings without the need for any external monitor. On the right are 2 3.5mm mic or line inputs, a headphone jack, a tally light control and a USB 2 socket for loading images and doing flash disk recordings. The back has the 4 HDMI inputs, 2 HDMI program outputs, and they are program output only, not multi-view, which is a crying shame. Then there's a USB-C connector for making the device appear as a webcam to a computer to use with OBS or Zoom or whatever. There's Ethernet for direct streaming and a power jack. The left-hand side has a proper on-off button, which is nice, and a vent for the fan. There's a tripod thread underneath, which is great if you don't want to have the unit on a desk. And even better, there's a VESA mount on the back, so you could put it on an articulated TV arm. The power brick is universal, with clip-on adapters for the different types of sockets used in countries around the world. And it uses a locking connector to the unit, which is fantastic. That's the hardware then, and although I wasn't intending this to be a tutorial, I think inevitably it will be one if I show you what all these buttons do. Switching it on takes 23 seconds with this little animated button selection, as you can see, and a logo. And eventually it will come live onto the multi-view screen. There we go. Showing you top left your preview of what you're going to put to air, top right what you're actually putting to air, including audio metering. Then you've got the 4 HDMI inputs here as preview inputs, again with their own individual metering. And as I've got the cameras all surrounding me, then you can see their meters are much the same. Now I've only got 3 cameras, and also I haven't plugged one into input 1 because on this, which I think is quite an early version of the hardware and firmware, I've already had one firmware update on it, for some reason HDMI input 1 won't accept a progressive signal from any of my cameras. It'll only accept an interlaced one. Now I think that is a fault because this is early hardware, and I have told the manufacturers about this, as I did about a couple of things in the early firmware, and so I assume that will be rectified on production versions of it. Either way, I don't have a camera for this one, and I haven't plugged one into that because it doesn't like the output from my progressive cameras. Anyway, there's your previews, and on the right hand side you've got a menu and information screen which tells you all kind of things, such as what your current logo is, what your current still pattern is, what your mix effect is, the transition time, whether you're recording, streaming, whether there's a card plugged into it, a flash drive plugged into it, and also encoding settings for if you are recording or streaming. Anyway, come back to that in a minute. Let's look at the buttons. Top left is a lock button, so you press, I think, and hold that, and then it simply locks it. So no matter what else you do, none of the buttons actually do anything. Now you only have to press and hold it again to unlock it, so it's not like it's a complete deterrent against ne'er-do-wells, but it can stop you being able to accidentally lean on the buttons if you have pressed it, because otherwise obviously you would be able to change it. So I guess that's a useful function. Mute is exactly what you'd expect. When you press mute, you can see that the meters are still showing, but they have gone to grey. So although there is audio still within the system, it's not actually putting any to air, and the button flashes to let you know that you are muted as well. So unpressing that puts us back to the normal state with the metering showing that sound is being output. If you press this logo button, the preset pattern logo pops up as the final output. Whatever else you've done, whatever keying and everything else, the logo will pop up on top. And yes, it doesn't have to be a football. You can load your own logo, which I'll show you in a minute in the menus. Pressing the audio button brings up an audio mixer control panel. On the bottom right here, as you can see, you've got the main program output, you've got the 4 HDMI inputs, 2 microphone inputs from the side, and then a headphone output as well. And you use this left button to toggle along which one you want to change. So let's go to, say, input 1, and then the right button, you can press that and turn it on and adjust the volume that way. And that is the input volume from HDMI input 1, which is the one I don't actually have anything on. And you can, let's go to that one. You can see it's showing in green there, pretty small, AFV, audio follows video, which means that as you cut between the cameras, the sound will be whichever one is currently active. But you can change that to, there we go, on. You can toggle through it with on, off, audio follows video. So if you want one particular camera's audio to be permanently on, no matter which camera you switch to, you just change its channel to be on. If you want the audio to follow whether you're switching the cameras, you toggle it to AFV, and then, as I say, you can adjust the level of it here, and you can adjust the headphone level as well, and that is basically your audio. You can adjust, by the way, audio delay, but it's not done here, it's done in the menus. This is more for audio mixing while you're actually broadcasting rather than configuring it, so to speak. So I'll turn that off. The effect button here again brings up another menu, and this is what kind of wipe transition you'd like when you do a fade on the T-bar or when you press the auto button. So by default it's a mix, but you can have a dip to color, you can have it pushing right to left, left to right, up, down, bars, patterns, grids, all this kind of stuff. Let's try that one. There we go. And then you could change it to that one, which will give you that kind of, I mean, who's going to use those kind of effects? I don't know. You're more likely to use the standard mix, which is a dissolve between the two cameras. And of course you can do a cut, which you wouldn't do with the T-bar. You'd use the cut button by and large. The scenes button over here works in conjunction with the A and B button. The way this mixer works is that you've got an A channel and a B channel for every output, and if you put up both A and B, you can see here you've got a little one with a bigger one behind it. So the little one is channel B and the big one is channel A, and behind all of them there is always the still image that is set up on the pattern button. That's always there in the background whether you want it or not. I don't think you can get a black background unless you load it up as a black image. But when you bring up channel A, you can then set what you want channel A to be, and if you bring up channel B, you can then set up what you want channel B to be. And obviously this is a bit weird because you've got A sort of quite hidden in the background by B. But if you go to scenes, you see, you can choose how you want it to look. So if we pick the second one along, A and B are alongside each other over the background image. Or if we go to the next one along, A is the big image with B the small one in the corner. Or other way round, B is the big image with this. Let me change that bottom image to something else, then you get the general gist of it. And then A and B in different corners, and a little a with a big B. And again, by toggling which one you want to adjust, and you'll see that you can actually turn the layers off if you want. So you could just have B over a background, but if you turn A on, you'll see the currently active layer has a little green line around it. So that's the one that will change if you change the camera and then press B. It's still lit, so it's still active. It has a green layer around it, and now you can change that one. And in doing that in the preview window, you're setting that shot up. While this is going out live, you're setting this one up to how you want it to look. Let's put something else in that one. Let's do that. And then when you want to take that live, you would press cut to do an immediate transition, or a dissolve if you wanted it like that. And then whatever was live is now over here in the preview window, and you can start setting up something else for the next shot. So if you go to that, and now that is live, and again you can start changing what scene you want for the next scene, and then cut to that scene. Now the only thing, again early firmware I think, at the time of me recording this, you only have these scenes, and although the menu does give you the option to change the size of these and the position of these, again I'll come back to that in a minute with the menus, I can't save them when I've changed them. I believe they're going to add that in a firmware update, but at the moment you've got these 6, you can change them, you can cut to them with different sizes and positioning, but if you ever cut away from that and changed it, it wouldn't be able to go back to it. You'd have to reconfigure it each time. But I believe they are going to come up with an option to save some presets. It shouldn't be too hard. I wouldn't have thought in the firmware to do that. But there you go. So that's your A and B layers, which you can assign to whatever you want from your different inputs and then take them to air. Or if you don't want to do it as a direct cut and you don't want to do it as using the T-bar, you can press auto and it will do whatever your preset effect was. In this case, a mix. If you change it to dip and do auto, it does a dip to colour. And that's the general gist of it. Now then, let me bring up on the left hand side here camera 4, because I've pointed that at my green screen deliberately so I can show off that this has a chroma key function. When you press chroma, there we go, it is chromaing out the green to show you the background picture, which in this case is the background pattern, which you would see if you turned everything off. There's the background pattern. Layer A back on again. That's what layer A actually looks like. Turn the chroma on and it's done that. And I have in advance set up the chroma to match the colour of my background curtain. Now you can see the curtain actually isn't either unironed and it's not well lit, but you can make the key work. I'm sure if I pixel peep that it wouldn't be perfect, but that's because I haven't got the green screen looking particularly pretty. It needs an iron and it needs better lighting, but it does show that you can set that up for how you want it. You can also have, if you don't want a chroma key, you can also do on a luma key. Now I didn't actually set this up, so I've no idea if that's going to luma out or not. There's something very slightly happening over there. You can change it in the menus. I might come back to that in a minute. This record button, if you have plugged in a USB key into the side here and it has space on it, when you press rec it will start recording. Now at the moment it's saying no space because I haven't plugged. I'll tell you what, I'll plug that in. I'll plug that in, the light should flash on that and it should come up with a little icon in the bottom right saying you've got a flash drive plugged in. So now if I press record, there we go, it's giving it a file name of something.mp4 and it's starting to record my output. So if I do a few transitions and things, whatever I'm doing is now being recorded into H.264 25 FPS at 8 megabits a second onto that flash drive, and the record button flashes so you know you are recording. I will just stop it doing that. Recording complete, it says. Hurrah! The stream button, if you have configured stream keys and things, enables you to stream directly from the device up to YouTube or Twitch or I think any RTMP server. It does need to be plugged in through Ethernet. This is not Wi-Fi. You need to plug in through an Ethernet cable to a router of some sort, which itself could be a Wi-Fi router, and in fact it will help you if it is, for reasons I'll come back to in a second. But once you've configured the stream keys, you press stream, and yeah, it's saying please check network because I haven't plugged it in, but if it was plugged in and configured, pressing stream would start it streaming to whatever stream key you had configured. In fact, I will plug in a bit of Ethernet. I haven't configured a stream key, but it will now be getting its DHCP off my router. Again, it still won't stream because I haven't actually configured it. And then the bottom two buttons here I can't demonstrate. They're to do with PTZ cameras, point tilt zoom, remote control cameras. I don't have any of those cameras, but if you did, you could configure them over the network using these buttons, but I don't have any. And also this button here marked PTZ, it's not only used in the menus, it's used to point, tilt and sort out your remote cameras. Now these buttons along here, fairly standard switcher operations. On the top row in red, red meaning live, is whatever is going to air. So if you press these, it will cut straight away without the need for any pressing of cut or auto or this. Whatever you're pressing on here is going to go to air live. And whatever you're pressing here is what you're setting up in the preview window, ready to go live as and when you want to hit the cut button. But if you press any of these top row of buttons, it will change directly what is going out to air. Now, the interesting thing about that is that when you have an A and B side by side, and you can see it's telling you that cameras 2 and 4 are the active ones, 2 and 4. No, actually, that's camera 4 and that's camera 2, but they're the active ones. But if you change them, and notice it's changing one channel, but not the other. Now, can I make it change the other one? I have a feeling the A and B buttons here are literally only referring to the preview output. Yes, they are. So I don't know of a way that you could change the other layer, because the layer buttons are strictly operating on the preview side. The still button here, let me come up with a slightly better image to demonstrate that. Hang on. What I will do is just configure that with a full size image 3, cut to that. There we go. I'm just putting something up so you can see that my hands are moving, but if I press still, it freeze frames the current image. It flashes to let you know you've done that, and if you let go again, it just takes you back to where you are. So waving, still, hand upside down, and back to where you actually currently are. I don't know quite why you'd use that. If you were doing any sort of sports or anything, you'd have to be pretty quick on the mark to actually get that still button in time, but it is there. And then pattern is the preset pattern, which you can take to air like that, except I had that set up with scenes on it and things, but you can see that the pattern there you go, there's the pattern. And you can load up whatever background pattern you want. It's a 1920 by 1080 PNG file, I think, and you can see it in small here on the menu screen. FDB is fade to black, which just takes your output to black, and also, you'll note, mutes the output as well. So you don't need to do fade to black and mute. At the end of your program, you can just press FTB and it will take it dark. Then you can stop yourself streaming and undo that, and it'll bring it back on again. Or if you just want to pause for whatever reason. I don't think you can do fade to pattern, because that would be quite handy, wouldn't it? If you had a still image that said broadcasting will resume again shortly, it'd be quite handy to be able to fade to that and then fade back up from it again, but I don't think you can. Right, that's most of the buttons. Let's have a quick look at the menus. I'm not going to go through every single one. The way you do this is you turn this knob to select the menu, click it to select an item, scroll through them, click it, and then turn, and you can adjust the parameters and use menu to go back. But things you can configure here are the layout of all kinds of things, the duration of the effect you've chosen, the crossfade effect. You can do that here instead of doing it in the effects button. Let's just go back, and then here you configure your 2 layers. So you've got source for one layer is a pattern. Oh, hang on. If I change it, you can see it's changing over here for the current layer. I think if I went A, yes, that would then change layer A, and you can then change the layer. Hang on. And resize and there we go. Make it smaller and move it around. And this is what I was mentioning earlier. You can't now save whatever that layout is. So you can use it, because I can cut to it and take that to air. But if I ever changed that and went back to one of the presets, well, now we're on the preset layer, and I can adjust that, but the previous one I had configured has gone. But I do believe they're going to add that in the firmware where you can save your own presets. Now, you can actually tweak this a bit with shape masks. I haven't really used this much, but you can select different masks instead of it just being, you see the image is here, there's a bit of it here, and that's because you're choosing a shape mask. Let's choose a speech bubble, and then you can make it bigger, and it's sort of cropping the image with that mask. Obviously a lot to kind of mess around with if you want to on that. I'm just going to turn that off. I don't particularly have. You can also do region masking cropping effectively. And again, the key controls are here. So if you want to change your luma key, you can actually turn that on for that layer. Hang on. Off, luma or chroma, which is effectively pressing these buttons here. This is your audio controls, which is the same as if you pressed the audio button, but you can do it individually here. The next one along is your images. I did say you could load images up, so there are the 6 stock images it has built into it. If you go to add image, I've put some images on. There's one of Parma Cathedral. Let's load that one up. And in fact, we'll load them all up. Why don't we? And I think if we then go to image, it's loading up my images. So I could now select, let's have that one, load that. And instead of the trees that it had built in, it's now loaded up Parma Cathedral. Or we could load up some boats. Image 1. It seems to take a moment to think about it before it does it, but there you go, images of boats. And that has now become the standard background image. You can also change the logo. So these are the ones built in, but if we do add logo, again, I've added one there. So it's now added that into my logo selection. And there's the logo, and we select logo, and it loads it. I think it's done it. So if we now do logo, oh, there it is, rather large. You can go down to logo position, and then I think you can, yes, I've obviously saved that too large on the disk, but if I made that logo a bit smaller, I could put it wherever I want and then bring it into existence with my logo button. Right, enough mucking about. Here's the streaming. You can set it up to what frame rate you want. A load of different choices on frame rates. Up to 60. I mean, literally anything down to 10. I'll do 25. I'm in the UK. That's our standard. And the bit rate goes all the way up to 30 megabits per second. And you can have it down as little as 1. I had it on about 8, I think. Seemed like the right sort of amount for me. And then streaming, you can see here you've got 2 stream keys that it has pre-programmed, which are no good to me, but you can load your own. Now you have to load your own from a web browser looking at this thing's internal web browser, which means you do need it plugged into an Ethernet. So if you want to stream and configure those, which obviously you will, this needs to be on a network so that you can then get your phone and you just point your phone's browser at this thing and it comes up with a web page that is all the controls for the device, except, strangely, the scenes button. You can control the audio, you can mute it, you can change the cameras, all through the web browser on your phone. I will show you that in a second. But for some reason, the scenes selection isn't available. Anyway, that's how you would load your stream keys. You can also change how you want the audio level meters to appear on your preview screens here. You can change what you want the main output. There's 2 HDMI outputs on the back here. Now, annoyingly, they are both identical program outputs. You cannot reconfigure them. So you can't have one as program and one as multi-view. I asked them about that. They said no, the hardware won't allow it. It is both are identical program feeds. So I suppose one you could plug a recorder into and the other one you could go off to a projector or a big screen or something. But you can change what the output is, the format, frames and so on. What else have we got here? This is to do with the IP cameras, PTZ cameras. Haven't got any of those, but you can change their focus, exposure, white balance and control them all from here if you want. And then you've got some general system settings, so what language you want it in, whether you want the fan to run in auto or all the time. Then you've got time controls. Now, if you select the DHCP, it does give you all the information about what IP address it's been assigned and so on. But also, if you go down here to remote, you can see you get a QR code. And if I scan that with my phone, is it going to see it? It should do. There we go. It's going to fire up the web browser and take you to this device, which has a little web page. And I don't know how well you can see that screen, but if I, for example, hit mute, that has brought on the mute. So you can control the whole thing from here. I can bring up the logo from here. I could turn on the chroma key from here, which isn't going to do anything at the moment. But I could muck about with my layers. You can see they're swapping on the preview screen. You've got all the audio controls here on the audio tab, and you can change the volume levels and things. And somewhere in here, there we go, stream address, stream server address, which you can type in a streaming key. But of course, if you've got your YouTube app open, you can just copy and paste those in, and then that's how you load them in to the device, so that you can then press the stream button and go live. So you go to this button here called Media, and it gives you the option of typing in your stream addresses 1 and 2, and uploading pictures and logos from here as well. So that is how you type in your stream addresses. Well then, what about some conclusions on this device? I like it with some reservations, I would say. First of all, I like the size of it. It really is just the size of a small book, and it's very portable. So that is good. I like the fact that it has little touches, little silly little touches, like having the whatever size thread that is on the bottom, so you could stick it on a light stand or a microphone stand or whatever. And the fact it's got this, I think it's a Visa standard mount on the back, so you could stick it on one of those arms. Little things like that just help when touting this thing around. I like the fact that because it's got the encoding and streaming ability all built in, as long as you can plug this into some Ethernet, and because it's got the monitor on the front, you don't need anything else other than your cameras and cables, obviously, but you don't need laptop or monitors or anything. This is a very, very compact streaming solution. Just take this, your cameras, plug it in, and as long as you can connect it to the internet via Ethernet somehow, then you are away. Now, that said, although it's very useful having this screen and the multi-view, sometimes you want a bigger output and you want to take some screens along, in which case, yes, it has the 2 HDMI outputs on the back, but oh why didn't they make one of them configurable to be multi-view output? Because if anything you're going to want to see on a bigger screen when you're operating, it's the multi-view, but you are limited to seeing the multi-view only on the built-in screen. I did ask if there was any way they could feed the multi-view out of the UVC, so if you had a laptop plugged in, perhaps you could use the laptop as multi-view, but apparently it is not feasible to do that. There are hardware limitations that mean that's just not possible. So multi-view is only on the little screen. But again, it kind of depends what you want, because it is an all-in-one unit. The fact that it can do it on the little screen, and it has a little screen built in, means that it trumps, in that respect, direct competitors like the obvious Blackmagic ATEM Mini Pro. I've looked up the price of this. It's on AliExpress for, well, the cheapest I found it was £258, and that was UK pounds. I'm not sure whether you'd be charged any kind of customs duties as it came through customs into the UK, but 258 quid, and I think the Blackmagic ATEM Mini Pro, which has had a recent price cut, looks like they're not doing the original Mini anymore, just the Pro, which also has the built-in encoding but doesn't have a built-in screen, that's retailing at around the same price. So your decision on whether you'd like the Blackmagic device or this one kind of hinges on whether you want a couple of program outputs and a built-in screen, or whether you want the Blackmagic ecosystem or not. What else do I like about this? Well, it's fairly easy to use. I got my knickers in a twist occasionally with selecting layer A and B, and I'd forget which one I was currently selecting, but that really is operator error rather than actually being a problem with the device. I'll mention now that the microphone inputs, 3.5mm microphone inputs, don't seem to supply any power to a microphone, so you will need mics that have their own little battery in them, rather than there are some that need plug-in power. You can switch these, I think I'm right in saying, I'm doing this from memory, I think you can switch these to a line input as well. The headphone output, I plugged in a pair of Sony, I think they're called MDR 7506s or something. They are relatively, I suppose, semi-pro headphones, and even at full volume the output was really, really quiet. That is presumably something to do with the impedance of the headphones and the output driving of this. So it maybe you need to use a different pair of headphones if you want to hear it. It was really quiet, the output on that. I like the fact you can stick in a USB stick and record what you're doing. It's worth noting, just a technical note, when you're configuring your YouTube streaming keys, initially I just got a blank screen at YouTube and I was bashing my head against the wall trying to work out whether I had some sort of firewall blocking going on. No, it turned out the default stream URL that YouTube gives you is just RTMP. This thing is encoding it encrypted, so it wanted RTMP-S. So do make sure you use the encrypted URL to YouTube. As soon as I did that, whoosh, there was the signal straight away up at YouTube and all was well. What else to mention on this? Well, I've got this odd little fault in that the first HDMI input would only see interlaced signals. Now, I've talked to the people who make this. They said, well, that's really odd. We've never seen that before. So I think I just happen to have a faulty unit, because HDMI 2, 3 and 4 all had no problem seeing the output from my cameras at all. Modern camcorders do send progressive output, but for whatever reason, HDMI 1 here just wouldn't accept it. I had to switch the output of the camera to pretend to be interlaced in order to get the signal into here. And that's not really optimum. But again, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that somehow this is just a faulty unit. Anyway, I've alerted them to it. They've given me a couple of firmware updates while I've been testing this, so they clearly have a software team who are developing it. For example, I did early on find a bug. I can't remember what it was. I managed to press some buttons and something went haywire, reported it to them. They sent me an update. That bug now seems to have gone. I've seen a couple of reports on reviews of this of people saying that when you do certain cuts or transitions between sources, there is a flicker or a flash of something that clearly shouldn't be there. Instead of just going from source A to source B, it's source A, then a brief, ever so brief, probably 1 frame or something, flicker, and then it makes the cut. Now, I didn't see that myself, but I have seen reports of it, and I saw it actually on a YouTuber's review of this as well. But again, that I think was on an earlier version of the firmware, so that might well have been stamped out by now, and if not, I would hope they would get rid of it, because it sounds like the kind of thing that a firmware update would sort out. So, yes, okay, reasonably happy with this, not happy with the HDMI 1 not working, a few little headaches and grumbles just to kind of get my head round to get it going, but I like the idea of this all-in-one, plug it in and you're going kind of unit. Whether you would want this over the obvious competitor, only you can decide. And I would say if you get one of these, do plug it in and give it a thorough test to make sure everything is working as expected before you decide whether or not you want to keep it or not. I don't think at the price of 200 and whatever I said, 280 quid, I mean, it's mind-boggling. This is the stuff that was thousands of pounds in TV studios just a few years ago. So it is mind-boggling they can do this at all. So yes, a guarded thumbs up, as long as you are sure that this is what you want, and when you get it, make sure it's absolutely working, has the latest firmware and all that kind of thing, so it's working correctly for you. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope this was in some way useful. Cheerio.